Hey, everybody. Thank you for checking out another episode of the Art of Intervention Project, a special project we put together as a resource for families, loved ones, professionals dealing with a loved one that has addictions. And today I get to interview Scott Graham of Carefrontations. Really cool guy, great story. We're going to get into that a lot today. But primarily, Scott, why don't you just kind of maybe tell people, I don't know, where you are right now and
Yeah.
give a quick background.
Well, I'm right now. I'm talking to you from Maui. I'm at a conference, and that's not my home base. My home base is up in Washington State,
Okay.
and so, but I'm only there about 10 days a month because otherwise I'm traveling around the country, on a rescue mission with the family. So people ask, where do you live? It's like out of my suitcase.
Yeah. Well, you and your wife do this together, right? You and Jenny?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jenny and I have been doing this we're in our 32nd year of doing this, and we're more passionate today than we've ever been. So it's wonderful to say that because it's a tough lifestyle, and it's not the work is not as tough as that. Really, the traveling and the waking up unemployed every day, not knowing where I'm going to go from one day to the next. And so we just count on the Lord to, bring people to us, and we share. And we don't want to go everywhere we're invited. We only really want to go where we're sent.
Mm.
And that's kind of our mantra. So we vet people out just like they're vetting us out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you guys check out carefrontations.com. I like how it's not confrontations, but carefrontations.com.
Yeah,
You
with an S
care enough.
with an S at the end.
Yes,
That's the
carefrontations with an S.
mm, hmm
Care enough to confront. And I know you have a different perspective than I'd really almost say anyone else I've interviewed so far for the Art of Intervention Project. But when you were a kid, you thought, I'm going to be an interventionist, right?
Oh yeah, I dreamt about that and had dreams and nightmares both. And no, I mean it was I could never have picked to do something like this in a million years. It was, I really believe I was chosen to do this. I really do. And it happened late in life. I was 30 when this dropped down in my lap. So
Well, I know you take this from a perspective of faith. So let's
I do.
tell people a little bit, just maybe just a snapshot of your story, and then
Okay.
we'll kind of get into what's intervention and those, so they get to know you a little bit.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, it's a long story, so I'll really give the Reader's Digest version. So to give you a feel for what brought me into this arena of life, I was in law enforcement. I was an LA County Sheriff's deputy back in the '80s, and I worked undercover in vice narcotics out of West Hollywood. And I had not dreamt about being a cop either. I just it's something I saw a TV commercial. I had two young kids. I wanted to get a job that had security benefits, that kind of a thing. And I thought, well, I could do that. But if you knew me, you would laugh because I was cleaning pools at a swimming pool cleaning business back in Southern California, and I was a partier. I was getting high every day, but I had a really good work ethic. So I was cleaning 100 pools a day or a week. I mean, and but anyway, so I became an LA County Sheriff's deputy, and of course, I had to fudge on all the answers because they ask you, how many times have you drank and have you ever smoked pot, and, done any illicit drugs, and I gave partial truths, and I was hired. They didn't do lie detector tests back then. I had the all-American look going on. I was young. I was in my early 20s, and they needed people like me. And I was an athlete. I was an all-city football and baseball player, and the physical agility aspect. I was like one of the best in my academy. In fact, I was named or voted the guidon, which you carry the flag. If anybody's familiar with the military, you carry the flag in front of your whole platoon.
Wow.
And I thought that was a great honor until I started running 5 miles holding this big, huge, giant flag. And it's like, this is not conducive to a normal run. But nevertheless, I worked in the jail for about a year, maximum security jail, and which is good because you really learn how the criminal mind works. And then I was out in the streets. But long story short, I had some personal problems in my life. I'd been married for about 7 years, high school sweetheart kind of a thing, and a couple of kids, and we started to drift apart, and she ended up leaving me,
Mm.
and it devastated me. It just crushed me, and I didn't really have the coping skills I think a normal non-using person would have. My emotional health stunted at about 15 when I started, and I started to self-medicate first with alcohol, and then turned to other things. I'm undercover, so I'm like, I've got everything I want whenever I want, if I want.
Right.
And I decided to take that plunge, and one thing leads to another, and I'm taking drugs from businessmen, not the drug addict on the street. I'm talking people who have a whole lot to lose, and they'd be very happy if I offered them, hey, you don't want to go to jail, do you? And it's like, no. And, well, what is it worth not to go to jail? Is anything? And so we put a little deal together, and I'm happy, they're happy. And but greed with addiction goes hand in hand, and one thing leads to another. And all of a sudden, I am arrested while on duty back in 1985. Made ABC and CBS, all the national news. It was national news that cop gets arrested while on duty.
Wow.
And I'm facing 6 to 8 years in prison. And it went on for about a year, the court case, and that's when I met Jenny. She met me in the middle of my mess.
Wow.
We met and married in 20 days, 34 years ago. And she had been waiting for somebody. The Lord had given her a download. I'm gonna have a short, stocky guy with green eyes and more freckles than you, and two little towhead blonde kids, 6 and 4 out of diapers. And that's the vision that the Lord gave her 4 years prior till we met. And she was waiting.
Wow.
He didn't give the download that he'd also be facing 6 to 8 years in prison. That's one thing he held back. But we have been on a ride. It's been an amazing ride, but I ultimately pled guilty. I had a great attorney. He said, you can beat this. It was all circumstantial evidence. And the Lord said, plead guilty. If you want to move on with me, this is what you've got to do. And Jenny and I both had separate downloads that we shared simultaneously. And, we cried on the bed for hours.
Wow,
and it's like,
that's
we're
awesome.
going to do it. So I got convicted I got the low term, 2 years. And that was, in fact, the first night I was in jail. They start you in county for a couple of weeks processing. I was next to the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. He was right next to me because we were both in protective custody. And I stayed in protective custody as I moved to Chino and then up to San Luis Obispo. Then I went in general population. I just stayed undercover. I did not want to do a whole year in a 6x8 with 1 day of daylight. It just was, I didn't want to do it. And I felt, again, protected. So yeah, so I that's a whole story, of course.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I got out. And I got an insurance license. The later got revoked because you can't have a felony and have an insurance license. But I went past the test and I got it for a little bit. And I'm out prospecting. I'm at a car dealership, and this big, huge guy comes walking up to me, a car salesman, like they do when you walk in a car lot.
Yeah.
And I knew instantly this guy knew nothing about cars. And so I asked him, what did you do before you started doing this? And he says, oh, I was a police officer local. It was in Ventura County, California, and I lost my career. And it's like, really? LA County Sheriff, how'd you lose yours? And he says, got into steroids, turned into cocaine. I ended up stealing $35,000 of cocaine out of the evidence locker. And my jaw dropped. It's like,
wow.
No way. Like, me too. What are the chances? And so he had gone to treatment and was doing intervention work. And I thought, I didn't even know what intervention was. And so I asked him if I could hear him speak, and we formed a friendship really quick, and we're still friends to this day. He got back into investigative work. He works for attorneys, but I stayed in the intervention field. So I learned about that process, went back to school to the University of Santa Barbara and got my advanced certificate, drug and alcohol counseling, and started working in the field. But always the passion of intervention. I'm still licensed as a counselor, but it's not my passion. People move a little too slow for my liking. I like to get in, stir it up,
Yeah.
and move on. That's how I'm wired. And so the interventions has always been my passion. And we have been full-time doing interventions for 17 years now. No side gig going on. We're just saying, okay, Lord, if this is what you want us to do, this is your business anyway. So, take us where you want to take us. And I couldn't have imagined what it is today back then. I didn't have the capacity.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about the Lord, is he builds capacity inside of us so that we can do more and more and more for literally the kingdom, because it's eternal work for us. So yeah, we've done over 2,000 interventions over these years. And, it's just, I feel so fortunate, so blessed to be able to go deep with people. Because, when you do interventions the way we do them, we're not doing therapy, but we're helping people be completely authentic and transparent. And that's what leads to, like we talked about before, the transformation in both the family and the person in need. So yeah, it's been an amazing ride.
Oh, there you go. That's a good list of credentials right there. It's from inmate to interventionist.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And
that could be my story too. Yeah.
Yeah. I reviewed you a little bit too. I know it. So we're probably like brothers from another mother, right?
Yeah. Same father, different mother, right? So
that's it. Amen to that. Yeah.
That is cool. Thanks for sharing it too. We'll probably have to do another show, just like hearing your the full story. Maybe even you and Jenny on sometime, just to hear that journey of you guys together.
It's an amazing testimony.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're here today to obviously talk about interventions, the process. What is all this? What is all this stuff? So when people think of the word intervention and they say, "Hey, you do interventions," like what is
Yeah.
that? How do you describe in a short, concise moment of like what is an intervention?
Well, I say to people, the word intervention, people have this perception, I think, more than anything, that it's going to be this surprise confrontation. It can get kind of messy more times than not, is what people think, and it's almost people. I think you're like almost stacking up evidence to convict somebody into treatment. Is I think the precept that people have, and that's not our style at all. I look at myself as a professional interrupter.
Hmm.
I am interrupting, dysfunction. I'm interrupting, ultimate death and destruction. And if you do it in a good way, then it has, really positive outcomes. So it's just interrupting something that has that warrants help, and it's how you do it. It's too big of a question to really do an elevator pitch with somebody. So
Yeah,
uh, it's just a professional way to interrupt someone that's going to either die or crash and burn.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. That and the family, because I know you're big on families, and when we look at like the art, which I kind of came up with this art of intervention, I
Yeah.
want to kind of go through like your definitions of addiction, recovery, and transformation. So, how do you define
Beautiful.
addiction to a family or somebody?
Yeah, that's a good question because it gets asked a lot. How do you know if they're addicted? And my response to that is, well, in my work of intervention, I'm not evaluating somebody because I'm not going to put a treatment plan together. I'm not going to treat them, and I'm not going to do a continuing care plan. So all we have to agree on is that the problem that exists is bigger than them and it's bigger than you. If it's causing problems emotionally, mentally, spiritually, relationally, vocationally, whatever, educationally, if it's a youth, then it warrants an interruption. That's really all you've got to know. I have the only time I did an intervention and the help that we had arranged wasn't the right help. They needed a higher level of care, not a lesser level of care. And I'll tell you, it's never too early to do an intervention, and it's never too late. And I would much rather caution, or err on the side of caution than, pull back and go, wait, wait, wait. And that's what our society has bought into. They bought into, you have to hit bottom, you have to be ready for help. If you don't do it for yourself, it won't work. Well, I have built a business on the opposite of that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Like I said, we're going against societal norms here in a lot of ways, what we're going to talk about today too. And so here's someone that identifies himself as having an addiction, something that needs to be, changed. And then we move them into a place of recovery,
Yeah.
right? So what does recovery look like? And again, we're talking general sense here, people. We're not saying like this is recovery, but just to give you an idea that maybe you've never like looked into these terms before or the understanding behind them.
Yeah, I think the language that we speak is really important because a lot of people use language there that it's just like a normal response, and they haven't, like you said, really thought it out. I What I do is I look at the recovery industry, the recovery field, and we have accepted that relapse is a part of recovery. And when I got into this industry back in the late 80s, it was like, be aware because relapse might happen. It's like the stove is hot, the cliff is right there, be careful. And now it's morphed into, it's okay to relapse because it's quote unquote a part of recovery. And so my big question is, well, how come? Not how
Right.
come we bought into relapse being a part of recovery, but how come relapse is happening so profoundly? I mean, if you looked at outcome studies, and again, depending on the type of substance or dysfunction a person is involved in, the relapse rate are 50% higher easily, and that's conservative. And if I'm a consumer and I'm paying, whether it's insurance or private pay, for my loved one to go to treatment, and they've got a 50% chance of relapse or higher, I'm not a real happy consumer. It's like, what the heck's going on here? And so I think that people are tethered to their old way of thinking. They haven't released themselves from that old way of thinking. They haven't had that transformational moment because they have not had the profound experiences while in treatment to lead to transformation. They are still hanging on to bitterness, resentment, unforgiveness. I think that's a big one. The family has not done the work they need to do to get well. And so the addict, alcoholic, or the person in recovery comes back to a dysfunctional environment. And so there's a lot of those factors that are prevalent in what we're trying to do is circumvent all those normal tendencies. And that's, we want somebody to be, clean and sober is a good first step, but it's like kindergarten. You know,
Right.
if you can get past needing a milk and cookies and a nap, then you can move on to free and sober, freedom in your sobriety, because that's what we're called to walk in, is freedom. Not that there's not problems, you know, that things happen, but healthy people rise above the obstacles that are in their way, and they don't even entertain the thought of, you know, the going back. And I learned I read a book called Driven by Eternity,
Okay.
and I was behavior modifying for 10 years of my recovery, and I was miserable, and Jenny was miserable, and she wanted me to read this book, and of course I pushed it away because I knew if I did I'd be accountable, and I wanted to play stupid a little bit longer. Finally read it, and the premise of the book, by John Bevere, an amazing man, you've got to hate what God hates and love what God loves to find freedom. And so I applied that to, I hate what substances did to my body, but I allowed them to do, and I love what recovery is giving to me, my freedom. And it took about a year, but all of a sudden when I internalized the hate for the drugs, not a person, the drugs, the terrorist, the assassin that they are, I finally felt the freedom, and I was no longer tethered. And it was an amazing epiphany that has not, you know, extinguished since then. So it's been beautiful.
Well, that book just made my reading list. So as I
Oh, do it. I
as
had
I
to,
go back through this, I'll write it down.
yeah, well, I had to go meet him. I actually went, the Focus on the Family was referring to us, and his office was right across in Palmer Lake. And it's like, who is this guy? I got to meet him. And we ended up meeting him, and we've been friends. You know, he travels all over the world
Oh
teaching,
wow. So he's
and
here in
he's a,
Colorado?
Colorado Springs is
Wow.
where he hails. Yeah, yeah. You've got to look him up and meet him.
Yeah.
He's worth the time.
There you go. Down the Springs and stalk him a little bit. So, but I know, and again, I believe like you and I appreciate sharing that, because you also mentioned earlier, you said, well, I was 15 when all this started, and they talk about
Hmm.
the brain development of
Yeah.
young men. Well, because I'm relating to myself at 26, right? So,
Hmm.
I just want families to hear, that it's when this starts. Like when I got sober at 29, I was like a 15-year-old kid, and
Yeah.
it showed. you
Yeah,
know
yeah,
um
you and me both. I so get that, and it's tough when you're in an adult body in an adult world with that 15 year old mentality. I mean, you can grow and catch up quickly, get on the fast track, but it's challenging.
yeah, it's very challenging. And you mentioned the word a couple times, just transformed. I know that's one area where we're going to. But when you think of the word transformation, um what does that really look like? Because obviously you're definitely a different man than
Hmm.
you were that boy from before. So
Yeah.
what does the word transformation mean to you, and how have you seen it play out in some clients?
Well, I believe that we all have internally three things in common. It's just, male or female. I believe that we all want to be in good standing with the people we profess to love and care about. You know, that we're not out of sorts with them. They affirm us, we affirm them. We're having a good day together. That's all important, because I don't know about you, but when I'm out of sorts with people I love, it's a grind. I
Oh
just
yeah.
don't like it. And then the second thing is that we all want to have a level of meaning and purpose into our lives from most days to the next. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can only watch the Golf Channel so much, and then I've got to go do something.
Yeah.
And then I believe that even if we're not afraid of death and we are focused on eternity, because that's really where the bulk of our time is going to be, in eternity. But on this side of heaven, I want to live as long as I can, because I get to enjoy what God's given us, kingdom build, all those things that we're doing. I enjoy that. And everything that relates to dysfunction, again, addiction, dysfunction, to me, they're one and the same, because we intervene on, eating disorders, gambling, gaming, pornography, sex addiction. I mean, drug, alcohol, only mental health, because all of it warrants interruption, and our model works. But anybody that's in dysfunction is doing the opposite of that, what I just described. And therein lies the inner turmoil.
Mm.
That's what's driving somebody to self-medicate or escape. And if we can transform from that dysfunction into this freedom zone of doing the things that are innate, instinctual, God's fingerprint in all of us, that's where the freedom comes. And the only way that transformation can happen is if you have profound experiences. And here's the challenge, is because as a therapist, I know how hard it is to treat somebody in dysfunction. They're still in denial, they're still glorifying, they're rationalizing, they're minimizing, they're afraid of being judged. All these things are blocking transparency. And so if we can create an environment that lends itself to transparency, authentic transparency, that's when transformation happens. And we know that that works because the families we work with, again, over 2,000 families, times it by 5 to 10 people in each family we've served. They all have our phone number. Our number's been the same for over 30 years. We're easy to get a hold of, and we have never gotten more than 5 phone calls that report a relapse in that first year that we help them. Never more than 5, and we help 50 to 70 families every year. And so no news is good news is our outcome study, because
Yeah.
people would call us because of the deep waters we go into. So I know that what we're doing not only is effective in getting people into treatment, but we're setting the treatment team up with what they need to treat the person effectively, because we give them everything the family has, which is good for them to give birth to it and relax once they're in treatment. And they stay in treatment longer, and they tend to stay on the good path of transformational recovery. So
Moving into a
okay.
transformed life is what we should all be about. And there's a stagnation in our industry, I think, of just being okay, being just sober.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I
And
think it's human nature, complacency. We're all like water. We take the path of least resistance,
yeah,
and we all hopefully will want to grow every. I mean, there's seasons where we don't do much, but by and large, I mean, I want to keep learning and growing until I'm gone.
yeah.
That's fun.
Well, all about the families, all about the individuals. And so let's help our listeners and viewers, depending on what medium they're kind of coming from here. Um,
Hmm.
they have a need and they get a hold of you. Can you
Hmm.
just kind of just walk them through what is this going to look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love doing that, because I know if I'm on the other end trying to decide how I want to approach this problem, I would want to know, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Beyond what does it cost? And so, and it's an interest, it's different than, like, if I'm going to go buy a car or something, like a few $1,000 experience. I go look at it, I think about it, I, kick the tires, so to speak. But in this arena, you're all intuitively deciding, because we don't get to meet until we actually are together and we're just on the phone. So I do it in a hypothetical way. I think that's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
So let's say, Rob, that we're gonna intervene on your brother, and you and I are talking. And let's say that tomorrow is the day that we want to get in front of him, and that's the same day that he'll enter into treatment. So prior to today, you have put together a team of people who are important to your brother, people who are significant. And you can have people who have no clue that he's struggling about anything, because here's the kicker: it's not what's wrong with him that'll get him into help. It's actually what's right with him,
Hmm.
because he's lost sight of who he is. He's forgotten who he is. And our job is, let's go wake up who he is. If we do that effectively, he'll say yes to help.
There you
So
go.
therefore, you can have people that, know him, the real him. And so 4, 5, 6, even 7, it kind of depends on the fabric of the family. If you have a large family, get-togethers are big, then a bigger number is good. But if it's a more, smaller, intimate kind of lifestyle, then a smaller group is better. I mean, I've done it with just one person, but each person represents kind of a roller coaster ride that breaks down the defenses that your brother in this hypothetical has built up.
Yeah.
And so, you got to take him on a little bit of a ride to break down those defenses that he's built up. So your team is assembled. So today would be our day. It's our preparation day. And of course, your brother has no idea this is coming down the road. It's like we're planning a surprise party, and we're creating our gift that we're going to give him tomorrow, which is your time and your love and your letter that you're going to put together. So we're going to be together about 6 hours. That's how long our preps take, 6 hours. And we're moving quick. We're not rushing, but we're really efficient. I'm a systems kind of guy, and so is Jenny, but she's got more the relational touch than me. It's like, okay, I got a job, let's get it done. And I'm not rushing anybody, but I tell people we're not doing therapy. So we're not going to unpack yesterday's events that bring us
Right.
to do what we've got to do. Again, we just agree that he's got a problem bigger than him, bigger than you. Let's build the bridge that gets him where he needs to go, is what our task at hand is. So that 6 hours is broken up into an educational component, about an hour and a half. Everybody knows what we're doing and how come we're doing it the way that we're doing it. We have a much deeper, getting him to say yes to help him walk the doors of treatment. It's significant, and nothing can happen unless that happens, but it's the least significant out of what else has to happen down the road. Again, that transformational piece. And so once the educational piece is done, then about 3 hours worth of writing letters. We have a very detailed, clinically driven, strategic outline that people use, because I'm a wordsmith. I think every word matters. We're not going to say anything we don't mean, and it's going to be short. It's not designed, this letter, to say everything you ever wanted to say. We're not trying to fix anything. We're trying to share our love, our care, our concern, and our hope for the future. And so the letters are about 2-3 pages in length, handwritten, typed up again, 3/4 of a page, page and a quarter at the most, because if it's too long, he'll get bored.
Yeah.
And so we got to hit him hard, hit him fast. And everybody's letter is uniquely different, which is so interesting because everybody's following the same outline, talking about the same person. But again, because it's a creative work, it's the majority of this information is what you love about him and what hasn't happened yet. So it's a creative process. And so I interview everybody for one piece of the letter as well, which is that's the only time we're going to look in the. We use the car analogy in the rear view mirror. I help people put that together because left to their own devices, they would be stacking up evidence. They would be using words that are guilt-driven, shame-based, condemning, judgmental, not meaning to, but that's how people talk, and that's why relationships get strained. So letters are written, they're critiqued very carefully because there can't be a threat of judgment, persecution, condemnation, guilt, shame. Like I said, it's got to be, but it'll be very direct. People are amazed. It's like, I can say that? It's like, yes, but it's how you say it. That's what matters. And so once the letters are all done and critiqued, the last hour and a half of our 6-hour block of time is dedicated to, we're going to role play it out. And people struggle with reading out loud. They're afraid of their tears and emotions. But I always tell everybody, no one's ever died or passed out, ever. So you'll get through it. You'll be able to get through it. And again, this hypothetical, your brother will be more moved by what he feels and sees, not what he hears. The content has more impact in treatment and thereafter. And because these letters are amazing prevention tools, and there's so much application in treatment and thereafter beyond just reading at the point of intervention. So fast forward, pretend we've got everything all dialed in. We know what order everybody's going to read in. There's a strategy to that as well. And now we're going to get in front of your brother. I do it differently than most people. You see the show, and we've been asked to be on the show a number of times. We say no, thank you, because they don't show the work that I'm describing right now. And so again, my law enforcement background, I learned real early on that, oh my gosh, people are so predictable. Incredibly predictable. And that was why I was called a first responder. If that wasn't true, I would have been called a first reactor. I would have been reacting to all the crazy. And so, you do anything long enough, you see patterns. And so I've learned to let go of what the person's going to think, say, feel, or do, as well as the outcome. I want it to work, of course. And thank gosh, 9 out of 10 times they do. But nevertheless, I let go, because all we're focused on, let's do what we're supposed to do, speak our truth in a loving way, and then let go. And it'll be what it'll be. He'll either be a microwave and say yes right now, pop, pop, off we go, or he'll be a crock pot and it'll take a little time to simmer. Either way, he's going to get help sooner rather than later, and you've done what you're supposed to do. So that's a good day in my book, any day. So now here's how I set it up. So let's say you're tight with your brother, and your task is, sounds like Mission Impossible, whether you accept it or not.
Get some theme music going here.
Yeah, exactly. So you get him sitting down on the living room couch, preferably yours, not his, because in his home, he feels all of his power and control. If you can get him in a neutral place, it gives us kind of the edge, so to speak. So let's just say you're sitting down on the living room couch, the rest of the team and myself, we're outside, and we're waiting for a text from you that says, come, or we've got a prescribed time. We're going to walk through your front door unannounced, right into that living room, little marching band, right? He looks up, his reasoning mind kicks in immediately, like, what's going on? Or like a lot of people like, no, it's an intervention. From the minute we walk in, oh, intervention, but nobody responds. Everybody just walks in calmly, softly, gives them a hug, a kiss, a handshake, whatever's appropriate. And now we're kind of like in a circle. It happens so fast. And then I'm standing there and he looks at me and he's like, who are you? His reasoning mind is kicked in even higher. And we tend to be more respectful to people we don't know. Right. And so I overload his reasoning mind. I would say, if his name is John, his example, hey, John, my name is Scott. I know this is a surprise, but your family's asked me to help them put together some thoughts that they've had, and I've helped them write these amazing letters that they're going to read to you right now. So if you could just be so kind as to stay where you're at, listen to everybody from beginning to end, and do your best not to interrupt, because we'll talk a little bit when they're done. It'll take about half an hour, all right? And he looks at me either like deer in the headlights, doesn't say anything. I take that as okay. Or he says, sure. And he doesn't have a clue what I just said. You couldn't describe what I just said. But all I've said is who I am, what we're going to do, and what the rules are. And I got his permission. So that way, if he does interrupt, which is a complete rarity, surprisingly, people always like, what if? It's like, probably not going to happen. So, and men are easier than women. Women are feisty. They're more verbal. They want to know, who are you? And are you making money at this? And, right. Where'd you come from? Where men just kind of sick. They stick their head in their shoulders and they're thinking, busted. And they take their medicine. It's pretty funny. And so now this is the beautiful part about what we do. Is once we're all sitting down in that circle, I've done my introduction and the first person that reads and everybody follows, but I want them to get out of their chair and I want them to literally kneel or sit right at your brother's feet. because you bend your knee, you say honor in your body language. You're lower than he is, so you're in a submissive stance, and you're close enough for, like, if it was man to man, you could put your hand on his knees, calf his foot. Your mom could hold his hand.
Mm.
Physical touch is so powerful. It takes everything inside of him to a zero, where he normally would have been jacked up thinking he's cornered in fight or flight thing. It's just amazing to watch, and people are dumbfounded. And then these letters are read, and there's a declarative of love, care, concern. There's an overarching statement that basically just, justifies why I'm in front of you. It might be, when I heard about your struggles with alcohol, my heart just ached for you, and I felt a sense of urgency to be here, but I also felt kind of inadequate because I don't know what I'm going to say or do that really will help, but I'm here all the same. That's the only reflection of yesterday. And then he's going to hear about why I love you so much. It's like a eulogy at a funeral. And it's so cool. I mean, we get to say it to him while he's still alive, instead of saying to him where we're thinking, spiritually he's going to hear us, but I want to say it to his face. And that way I'll never say, I wish I would have told him if he died tonight. I did what I was supposed to do. And then I'm going to tell him what I think the future is going to look like without help, and how the future can look with help. And then I'm going to ask him if he's ready for some help.
Mm-hmm.
In so many words. I mean, there's a lot more to all of that, obviously. And then I give them a hug and a kiss. The next person reads their letter. So literally, it only takes about 15, 20 minutes for, 4 or 5 letters, a page and a quarter. It's quick.
Yeah.
And it's, to me though, I've got 4 kids, grown kids, 7 grandkids to date, and I've watched a lot of birth. And watching birth is that miracle moment. There's no words that can describe that. And this process that I'm describing is second to that. It's that, I mean, people are just weeping. I've got men who've never cried for decades. And then the wife says, "What did you do to my husband? He's crying." It's like, it's that transparent, authentic moment. And it blows people away. And then once everybody's read, I just got 3 questions. I said, "Do you feel loved? Would you agree you're struggling? Are you ready for some help?" And I usually get yes, yes, yes. And then it's like, "Here's what help is." And I go, "Whoa, I don't know about that kind of help." But I go toe to toe. And I tell families, there's nothing that someone's going to say to me where I'd scratch the side of my head and go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't think about that." You're right. Today is not the right day. You let me know when you're, no, I'm going to keep them right on choice point. And I'm a pretty good persuader. My law enforcement, my counseling, parent for 40 plus years,
Yeah.
you get to be a good persuader. And if you can just do it where you don't elevate or escalate or get jacked up, you just don't get offended or defensive, then you can have the most adult conversation that you've ever had. And, if they don't go, then we're going to implement some, new guidelines, new boundaries that are really for our protection, but they ultimately help the person as well, because people in dysfunction, if they think anybody in their life, specifically the people who are there, are okay with their problem, they'll get help later, if at all.
Yeah.
And we're doing this because we want them to get help sooner rather than later, and be part of the problem, or part of the solution, not part of the problem. And we don't ever want to do this again. So it requires you to be ready to implement some boundaries. So that's how we do it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful. And hopefully parents, I mean, your parents, husbands, wives, children, whomever, you are in this process, right? That when you take it from a place of love and care, like Carefrontations,
Right.
there's a whole different feel about it. And, and it's ultimately their decision to go get help.
100%. And it's just, I tell families too, it's you're going to find out where you sit on the priority chain of their heart. Meaning, if you matter, they'll go. And if you don't, they won't. Because, this foolish comment, "Don't go for us, go for you." I wouldn't do it, but I feel like slapping up beside the head. It's like, Are you kidding me? They're not healthy enough to be the reason. Don't do that. They'll never go. You
Right.
have to be their reason. And see, what we're trying to promote, we do this in our family programming, but also in intervention work. We don't highlight it, but what we're trying to do is highlight what we call interdependency. This whole codependency, enmeshment, not good, but independence. And the world is touting, be independent, do it for yourself. Well, that's a lonely road.
Yeah.
And we weren't designed to do life like that. We were designed to do life on behalf of the people we love and we care about, without becoming codependent or enmeshed. And you think of sports teams, military, any good work environment, they're all interdependent, doing their own job, creating a great service or product. And this is no different. Recovery is no different. And that's a big reason why relapse is so high.
Yeah. I sit there and think of like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. They talk about reaching this level of interdependence with your family and synergy and everything.
Yeah.
So we walked through this great scenario. Thank you so much. My brother does not have an addiction issue. I'm just kidding.
Thank goodness. Sorry,
I
tell him I'm sorry I used them.
Yeah, no, yeah, I love that. Eric's great brother. So hey, bro, if you listen to this. So going back to, I want to go back to the beginning just for a second. So a family's going to call you.
Mm-hmm.
What are some top questions they should ask an interventionist when they hopefully are like shopping around to see who's going to be the right fit instead of the first dude that pulls up on
Yeah,
the
well,
internet?
yeah,
So
yeah, and it's really I'm sad to say that it's a pretty territorial environment out there. You've got people who are claiming to be interventionists and they're not. They're like brokering to treatment centers and getting people in. There's people who are not skilled or educated in the process of intervention, let alone treatment, so they don't have the therapeutic mindset. So what I would look for if I'm shopping around is I'd want to know, okay, how long have you been in business? Do you have any people who can recommend you? Like, I want to know treatment centers as well as people you've helped in the past, and that I think that can be pretty powerful. Of course, people are always shopping for price, and again, I'm sad to say there are people out there that are charging an incredible amount of money. I'm talking, $10,000, $20,000, and it blows me away because me personally, I'm an hourly wage kind of a thinker. I think everybody's worth X amount of dollars per hour if they're working. And you know, I guess movie stars and sports figures aside from that, I think they're way overpriced as well or overpaid. But nevertheless, I think your intervention costs can range anywhere probably from $3,000 up to $20,000. So I think that's important to look at. And just like with treatment, you pay for what you get typically. But there are people out there that charge a whole lot more than say we do, and I just kind of shake my head and go, "Wow!" I mean, I guess if you can, garner that kind of favor, then more power to you, I guess. But I'm telling you, I think people should be putting their money towards treatment and aftercare, not the intervention piece. I mean, I know it takes me. I'll give you an example. Like if I came to Colorado, it would take me 30 to 35 hours to do everything from start to finish, including travel, not sleep time, but just
yeah,
all the work involved. Because again, and so anyway, so like our fee for a Colorado intervention is $44.75 plus expenses. So you break that down, okay, say $4,400 divided by 35 hours, you do the math. That's a pretty reasonable hourly rate.
yeah,
And I have people in the industry that are mad at me because I don't charge enough. And it's like, but I don't, I'm okay with what I do. I really am. We give away far more than we get. I know that. We talk to 500 families a year, and we spend an hour with each family pretty much, and 50 to 70 hire us out of that. So that's a lot of talk time with
yeah.
people, but it's okay. So the treatment piece I think is really important. That's to me, it's we're not aligned with any treatment center per se. I mean, we have some favorites that really do good work, and because the treatment industry is very transient, the here today, gone tomorrow. It's a tough industry to keep a pulse on for me at least. And so I think that's a good question. Do you have any, what programs would you refer is a lot of times the question, even though most of our referrals come from treatment centers. So, we're not, sending them other places because they found a good one. But we have a checklist page on our website. The checklist page is a step-by-step guide how to put this whole thing together from beginning to end in a chronological manner.
Wow.
And that's the way to do it. I mean, it's interesting. I intervened on my daughter when she was 21. She's now 38. And when I went through the whole process, I said to myself, man, this is harder than I'm telling people it is. There's a lot of work involved here. You
Yeah.
got insurance, you got, cash pay, there's a lot to deal with. So it's people who put these things together, my hat goes off to them. I have such high respect for, the emotional drain that's involved in doing this. And I'm in the field, and it was tough few days. From the moment I got a conversation from my son, she was in treatment 3 days later, and I worked from sun up to sundown all those 3 days. So it's a big deal. You're saving someone's life.
Not only getting your expertise too, but you think of a family member calling all these treatment centers and saying, "Oh yeah, we'll take you. Oh yeah, we'll take you." But to use someone like yourself, can you kind of explain the value of how you find good treatment centers and why it's important to use a guy like yourself, an interventionist, to navigate that water?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jenny and I go to, I kid you not, 10 to 15 programs a year, sometimes on our own dime. I mean, we don't get paid for it, but sometimes they'll fly us out. And I've got to be able to have my eyes on the property, the staff, even though the staff can change before long. But nevertheless, I want to be able to say to families, I've looked into their eyes. I have seen and felt what it feels like to be there. Because to me, I think the environment is an important component to a positive experience. I don't think people have to be punitive in where they go. People, you're kind of locked into what insurance covers or what you can, cover on a private pay. You got to stay reasonable and practical with all of that. I'm not a big fan of mortgaging your home. I think if you want to take a loan out and pay it off in 1 or 2 years, that's reasonable. I would do that too if I didn't have the resources to pay. But I'm not a fan of taking money out of retirement. You've got to be practical. And so the aesthetics of the program are important. And then the clinical care is important. I'm a big believer in dual diagnosis treatment. I think that the clinical staff should consist of a doctor, a psychologist, mental health therapist, and drug and alcohol counselors, along with the recreational therapist, a spiritual person too. And that's where they get the term holistic treatment, where they're treating the whole person. So that's important. I think that an alumni piece is important. Are people staying plugged in after the fact? Is there the ability to do some continuing care there within the location? Because you really have an alumni feel when you go to a program. It's kind of like a college experience. And I tell people that it's like you're going to the School of Rob.
Right.
You're doing the introspective work that most men do at midlife crisis. So you're getting a midlife crisis moment in your 20s. What a cool thing!
Yeah.
You won't have to buy that red Ferrari or get divorced. So that's an important aspect too. And then the family component, do they have a strong family program that's beyond just education? I think that's why we love our family programs, because we are experiential. We took our intervention model and tweaked it to be a recovery protection. We call it bulletproof your recovery. And, that's an important aspect, because this is the only major medical problem that has such a high morbidity rate where the family goes dark. Once the person goes to treatment, they don't know what their role is, what they're supposed to do. I mean, there's great books out there, tons of information that a person could be motivated to read on, but there's an experiential piece, I think, that's missing in most family programs, quite frankly. And I'm not talking about, doing the sculpt work and, doing the goodbye to whatever drug thing. I mean, those things are good, but I think there's more that we can offer families that will help them along the way too.
Amen to that, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of value, again, like you said earlier also, that when the family was circling around and they looked up to you and said, "Who are you?" There is a diffusion that happens, like who's the dude and who's the new guy in the room.
Right.
And there is some kind of like mystery and kind of respect that happens there also. And obviously being a relatable guy, personable, friendly, those things help too, instead of just kind of like, well, we're going to sit here and take you to treatment today. So you're definitely helping lots of people, and the process, you said you're a systems guy. I mean, it is a system. It's a process, but using a football analogy, you're calling audibles probably multiple times through this too.
Oh, totally. Well, I tell people I'm flying by the seat of my spirit. So not my pants, but by my spirit. And that allows me to be authentic and transparent as well, because a person in need of help, they're highly sensitive and they're suspicious. And if they sniff you're selling them something, they'll shut down in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So you've got to be authentic and patient too. Got to be patient, and which is hard, because if you're getting on a plane somewhere to go to treatment and you've got a flight that's coming up, I mean, it's a real tightrope act. And but everything is changeable. Everything. I mean, again, I've at my age, in my 60s now, it's like I've learned to trust the process. I've learned to just go with the flow. That it's all good. It is all good. If I've got to stay another day, or I'm not going to take them and someone else is going to take them, and they just need to work through all that, it's all good, because it's about the person and the family before me or the treatment center every time.
I don't believe you're in your 60s, but I'll just take your word for it.
I'll be 62 in April. Yeah.
Really nice.
Wow. Yeah.
Very
Yeah,
cool. Well, yeah, you take good care of yourself, which is again, in this industry, you can see a lot of just people that are completely just like, just like a blob in the industry, because they work so dang hard. But I want to get back to, you mentioned the word spirit. We've talked about faith. I want to hear how does faith play a role in this process for you, and how you are connected with the families from a, I was called a prayer perspective, maybe, or something.
Yeah, that's such a not just a great question. It's a cool topic to talk
Yeah.
about, because it seems like the Lord, I mean, more than not, brings people of faith to us. People can, you know, you can tell just by the dialogue someone has if they're a believer or not. If you know, and you're a believer, you just know.
Yeah.
And you know, so people will ask, or you know, or are you a Christian? Or I don't know if they are, and I ask them, you know, do you have any faith? It's just I get to do that where you wouldn't do that in a normal conversation. And I have people at, you know, can I pray for you? And I'll never work with them. You know, I won't make a penny or anything, but can I pray with you on the phone? And people appreciate that so much. I believe that it's a spiritual battle for sure. It's more real than the physical battle is for sure. It's eternal consequences that we're dealing with. And so we've got a prayer team. We've got about 50 people all over the country, people I've met, some people I know, who pray for every intervention that we do. We keep confidentiality, of course, intact, but they're praying for every single prep and intervention that we do. So we've got that covering. Our church knows of every intervention that we do. They cover us in that, you know, in that way. With every preparation that I do, at the end of the preparation, if I don't know that they're believers, which most of the time I do, so it's not a real risk or anything. It's like, let's pray before we, you know, end this night, and keep praying. I'm going to be praying underneath my breath like a mad dog during the intervention. But I sometimes have people who, like, they're not Christians, or they are, but they're not charismatic. So they don't just pray out loud. You know, I'm not talking in tongues. They just don't pray out loud. It's a real private kind of a thing. And so I'll pray with them and I'll lead them in prayer. But sometimes I've got someone who's no, we don't do that. I said, well, I do. And I'm going to pray with my eyes open, like we're having a conversation. Cause I think, you know, the Lord's right here. He put a butt print on this chair right here. He's that real to me, at least. And so if you don't believe in that, how about you just think good thoughts while I'm praying. And so it becomes a testimony piece too, because the miracles that I have witnessed over all these years, it's just like, oh my gosh, does the Lord still do miracles? You better believe it.
Yes, he does.
He's just wanting people who believe, and will open the floodgates for the angelic host to, you know, the Holy Spirit to move freely in this place. And so if I had a nickel for every time I wanted to lift up a dropped jaw after the intervention and go to them, see, I told you, I'd have a pocket full of change. I'm telling you. And so it's just so fun to watch the Lord work. And even if he doesn't on that day, to still have the faith that it's going to change. I mean, I trust this process from the spiritual standpoint more than the, you know, the worldly, you know, psychology aspect of it. They all go hand in hand. They're all a part of. But you know, as a believing man, it's my whole life is based on my faith, every aspect of it, not just, you know, going to church on Sunday. It's every day, all day. Mm-hmm.
There's power in prayer, and miracles do still happen. And you know, it's funny, like interesting, like when our whole country is in crisis, right? Where do people go? They pray, right? They pray, and there's just power in prayer. And so that's why one of the reasons I was excited to invite you to be a part of the Art of Intervention project, because you do kind of have a little different perspective than, at least outwardly, that people will say, to just be forthright with your faith and just say, hey, here's how I've gotten through my stuff. And your testimony is probably real powerful, which we'll hit again in another time also.
Beautiful.
So I love it. I mean, you know, we got some great questions families know to ask interventionists. We've talked about the process, you know, what is intervention? How important is it to you? And I'm asking this because I get asked this question a lot as a believer, that, you know, churches will call me, have someone needs intervention, like they only want to go to a Christ-based treatment center. Okay. So how do you respond to that if people, like, that's all they want to go to and they think that's what their loved one wants?
Well, then I'm good with that. Does it have to be? No, because I think that, like, if I had to go to treatment as a believer and there wasn't a Christian program that I was able to go to, I would, you know, that higher power 12-step model. Well, I'm going to hang my recovery on the hook of Jesus. That's my higher power. So it all can apply. Everything that you hear, and there's so many Christian therapists and counselors out there that aren't working for a Christian quote unquote program. And all you've got to do is just say, hey, I'm a Christian, and I want to, this is the vein I want to go in. And then the opposite would be if the family wants their loved one to go to a Christian program. Like we refer a lot to Covenant Hills in Southern Cal, great program. And, but if the loved one's not a Christian, it's like not a good fit, because they're going to get turned off by that. A lot of Christian programs have a traditional track that you can, go plug into that, and then they're going to look and see that Christian track. All those guys and gals are having a lot of fun. I want to go into that one, kind of a thing. So you can transition into that if you need to. But it's not an absolute. Is it a benefit? I think for sure. But what I found too is a lot of Christian programs, not including Covenant Hills, it's pretty weak as a Christian program goes.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty weak. And if I walked into a Christian program because I'm a Christian and saw how weak it was, I would be disappointed. I really would. Not that people have to be, one to Christ or, have this evangelistic kind of thing going on, but I want to dive in. I want to see, where does the word apply to my addiction? Where does it apply to my recovery, to my future? I would need a good teacher to help me in that, instead of just doing this self kind of educational piece.
Yeah, that's good to know. I just want people to kind of hear that perspective also. What else would you like to share with our kind of viewers and listeners about interventions, or just, we'll stop with that question.
Well, okay. So to me, I've been frustrated for 32 years as I've listened to people that have called. Every single person that calls me needs what I do. And I get it, where money would stop them. I understand that totally. But I find that fear stops people from moving forward. Fear of the unknown, or they think that the person will respond the same way they have, but yet they've never done what we do, or an intervention would be different than what they've ever done. And so they're basing what might happen on what already has happened. And I think that's not, it's not accurate. I think that, like our tagline, care enough to confront. If you can get in front of somebody in a good way, in a healthy way, a respectful way, I mean, you've really got nothing to lose. I mean, you got everything to gain, because they're going to die. People in dysfunction, their quality of life will diminish greatly, and they're probably going to die prematurely, and they'll wreak havoc on everybody's life as well. And back in the old days, if we were a clan and we had one person who was dysfunctional, affecting the whole health of the clan, well, the elders would talk to the person, and if they didn't change, they literally would be banned from the clan, because we wouldn't let one person take the whole down. Yeah. And that's what I see too often is families are letting one family member take the whole family down. And it's faith, believing in something you haven't seen. And I know it can be scary, but I'm telling you, it's not only does it get people in sooner rather than later, but when done right, it enhances the treatment experiences, which increases the likelihood of success down the road. I had a gentleman who I did interventions for. He ran the Betty Ford Center for a number of years, and I did a personal intervention for his family. And he said, Scott, if I could have every admission go through what you take families through, it would change the course of treatment and recovery. And it's like, I know. That's why I do what I do. Mm-hmm. It's not just to get them in, it's to affect the whole system. And so I just want to have people feel that fear and do it anyway. Reach out. There's no obligation, at least from our business. We have 3 people answering phones, myself, Jenny, and our wonderful assistant, Jewel. And there's no obligation. We're not going to sell you anything. We're going to explain. We're going to encourage. We'll pray with you. And if it's meant to be, you'll know it, and you'll ask us. And so we don't ever chase people down. I think that's another, people are leery, they're getting sold, or, it's just, it's really a challenging time for all of us. But Satan's at work, but God is more powerful than any addiction. And your love combined with, the truth is more powerful than any addiction. So, don't wait. It's never too early or too late.
That's perfect. And that's why we do this Art of Intervention project, have a, quality interventionists on here. So that you can go to these individuals that are part of the project and yourself to say, hey, these guys are doing the deal, or I wouldn't have had them on the project. Really, right. I mean, it's like people are out there doing great work, changing lives. And, one of the things I've been doing with my Lifted from the Rut intervention world is I have a nonprofit arm now that if people want to donate money, they can actually donate money to help cover the cost for someone that maybe can't afford it.
Right.
And I'm excited to see how that plays out in 2020, because people need the help a lot of times. And I mean, you and I would probably do this for free if we could all day long, and just trust God to take care of the bills. But this is a business. This is what we do. This is what we're trained to do, and should be paid for our time. Because it's an incredible opportunity for families.
I love that. That's such a great, we've always thought that same thing. In fact, we're about a month away from launching what we're calling intervention in a box. And it's to help families do interventions the way that we do them on their own. But do it very system driven. Everything I described, it's going to be in PDF, audio, and video format. And so we're
Wow.
going to launch that we've spent a couple of years putting it together. It's been a really intense project, but we're doing it right, and we're doing it professionally, and it'll be at a low cost where people can afford it, and they can at least, get that piece done too.
Good for you. That's doing God's work
Yeah.
right there. So you're awesome.
Yes,
I
sir.
can't wait to meet your wife, Jenny, maybe
All
video or
right.
in person sometime. I don't know, but
Please do. Yeah,
keep
would
up
love
the
it.
good work. You guys, carefrontations.com. Hey, if they want to call you, like, what's the number?
So the best number is a toll-free number, and I'm going to pull it out of my my pocket. Sorry about leaning off here. I'm getting it out of my wallet here. Isn't that funny? I haven't really memorized my toll-free number. It's 844-588-3267.
Cool. And that's all on their website too. A lot of
Yep.
good. I'm looking at it right now. A lot of ways to connect with you guys. So enjoy the rest of your time down in Maui at the conference that you're at. And thanks
Thank
for
you.
just making time for me and for this.
Likewise. Really appreciate you, brother.
All right, cool. Catch you soon.
Okay. Take care.